Welcome to the Nerd and Normie Podcast. I'm a big film nerd, Everett.
And I'm Emerald, and I'm engaged to a nerd.
On this week's episode, we'll be doing two movies.
I chose the new Wonka, starring Timothée Chalamet, directed by Paul King.
And I went old school and picked the old Willy Wonka from 1971, directed by Mel Stewart and starring Gene Wilder. For the new Wonka movie, we will do non-spoilers and then spoilers. For the older Wonka movie, we'll do just a little bit of our general thoughts and comparing it to this newer version of Wonka.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it yet, you're not going to, so.
True. All right, let's get into it.
I've spent the past 7 years traveling the world perfecting my craft. You see, I'm something of a magician, inventor, and chocolate maker. So quiet up and listen down. Nope, scratch that, reverse it.
All right, so yeah, this week I chose the new Wonka starring Timothée Chalamet because I thought it looked kind of fun, and Everett seemed adamantly against it, which made me laugh, so.
I just thought it wasn't for me, and that Timothée Chalamet was not necessarily the best choice for this, and I would say that is exactly what happened.
Yeah, I am a little bit surprised it has an 84% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, just because it's fine.
Yeah, I'd wager a lot of those are just fresh. Like, it's not a bad movie, and if critics, instead of like what they normally do with movies for like children and stuff, just look at it and go, you know what, it's bright colors, it's fun, there's songs, kids will like this, I'll give it a 7 out of 10.
The way they did with Mario.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I walked out of it, I was like, yeah, no, that was fun. But the more I think about it, the more I dislike it as a prequel.
Especially then rewatching the 1971 after.
Yeah, if it was like on its own, I would be like, okay, maybe that's like a fun movie. But when it's a prequel to one that's so beloved and so different, crazy, it just doesn't really fit. So yeah, this follows obviously Timothée Chalamet's Willy Wonka. He's poor and doesn't really, have a lot to his name. The only thing that he has is that he loves chocolate and he loves to make it, and he moves to a new town to kind of make his name there. And the songs are fine, not great. The only ones that are really good are ones that they pulled the tune from the original. And the acting is also fine, not great.
Yeah, I think the biggest struggle for this movie, and what works so well in the older movie, is just that in this new Wonka, there's no straight man. Everybody is turned up to 11. Everyone is a caricature as opposed to a character. And so when you have Timothée Chalamet being kind of weird and everyone talking back to him, kind of strange, and the whole world is full of magic and whimsy, it loses its charm. Now, there is one moment where right at the beginning he's singing a song and dancing in the town square, and everyone's doing a musical number with him, and then it cuts wide and he's just dancing by himself, daydreaming about this. And so I think, maybe if they had actually built on that and like he's insane and this is all in his head, then this movie works potentially better. But they didn't. It's just full of magic and whimsy from start to end, which isn't exactly, it's weird.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I will give it credit where credit is due in that every time it took some weird, crazy, ridiculous storyline turn, those weird ends always came back later. Like, they never did something weird and crazy just for the sake of being weird and crazy. Like, it always came back into the story, which kind of felt like a fever dream, but I will give it that.
Yeah, so the director of this also did the two Paddington movies. I have never seen those, but they are much beloved. And I feel like if you took this movie out of the context of a prequel to 1971, it is fun, it's bright, it's colorful. I would have far fewer issues with it, but I think because you've attached it to something so wildly different, that you struggle and you open yourself up to these comparisons and these criticisms. And I just don't think that this necessarily is a great Wonka movie. That being said, it is a fun kids movie.
Yeah. Timothée Chalamet is a good actor, as much as it pains me to say it, because I don't really care for him as a person. But he is very good in like dramatic roles. And this one, I think he would have been good in, but again, you attached it to the 1971 movie directly, and it can't be the Johnny Depp one because of that weird dentist backstory. So it's obviously the Gene Wilder one that he's supposed to be, and he just doesn't have the weird, sinister quality that Gene Wilder puts into Willy Wonka in like such like at all. He just doesn't embody it at all. He's like the genuine good guy all the way around, no matter what.
Yeah, I think they're playing two wildly different characters, in which in this movie, Wonka is a beloved hero of the people, and he's just always doing the right thing and trying his hardest to be good. And that's just not who he is later, and there's nothing that like shows why he stops being that way. Maybe they're hoping this makes a bunch of money and they'll make another one that leads up to why he closes his factory and stuff, which is backstory from the original movie anyway. But like, yeah, I don't know. It didn't work. And Timothée Chalamet, his comedic timing was off. It wasn't like, he wasn't ever really that funny. He was trying to be weird and off-putting or charismatic and charming, and it just never quite came together for me. It just kind of fell flat, and a lot of the comedy in this kind of just is a bit stale.
Yeah, we were trying to brainstorm earlier on who should have played him, and obviously everyone says Jeremy Allen White because he looks identical to Gene Wilder, but I've never seen him in like a comedic or psychopathic role. Like, he's great in Shameless, he's great in The Bear, but I just don't know if he captures that energy. So Everett threw out Robert Pattinson, which I think is just a perfect choice.
Yeah, especially coming off the back of his voice in The Boy and the Heron is wild and unhinged, but in like a comedic, sinister way. He's great in movies like The Lighthouse.
Yeah, The Lighthouse energy.
Batman. Yeah, like he's done bigger movies like Twilight and stuff that are more, I mean, Batman's pretty mainstream, but like he's done those types of movies. So he's been on these kind of big over the top sets, but he's also done like a weird priest and The Devil All the Time. And like, yeah, he's got a great range. And I think he brings, when you look at him, you believe that he could be unhinged.
Yeah. So it's just, I just think on its own, it would be a pretty good kids movie to me. Like, though it's not one that I would latch onto and rewatch over and over, like The Greatest Showman music, you know, the music is fine, the colors are out there, but when you just attach it, it didn't hit correctly.
Yeah. And so, yeah, this fails under the weight of what's come before as opposed to failing on its own. But spoilers?
Spoilers. All right, moving into spoilers for the new Wonka movie. As I said, it follows a young Willy Wonka as he moves to a new town to try and make a name as a chocolatier. This town has already been claimed by 3 different chocolate companies who have teamed up to force everyone else out. They pay everyone in chocolate. Everyone is corrupt. Willy Wonka goes to stay there, and he does, like, immediately upon arrival, loses all of his money through a series of unfortunate events.
Mixed with, like, good deeds and, like, being a kind soul, which, again, just is a weird take on Wonka.
And so this man finds him and tricks him into going to stay at this other lady's place, and he can't read, so he can't read the contract that he signs, and ends up being stuck there doing the laundry with a 27-year sentence, basically. So he's like sneaking out to try and sell his chocolate to people, and
hijinks ensue.
Yeah, there's flying with, like, they fly, they do just a ton of stuff. And that's the other thing that really, really, really bothers me in this, is that he's making all these chocolates that make people float. They make people do all this stuff, whatever. But when you watch the original one, the reason that he's doing that is because he's, A, crazy, and B, because he's bored and he's run out of stuff to do, so he's experimenting with new things and none of them go right. And with this one, he's like, yeah, I just, harvested the energy from these thunderclouds and now people can fly. And it's like, that's not what it is.
Yeah, everything's just immediately achievable and magic. And he's like, oh, I need to make this guard fall asleep. I'll make a chocolate. Oh, I need this to happen. I'll make a chocolate. And it takes the kind of jeopardy out of the movie. He gets a store finally. They find a way to put enough money together to buy a store for just rent it for a week. And he's overnight able to transform it into this over the top magical place. Now, what I think worked well is his mother raised him on her own, and she was very good at making contraptions so that she didn't have to work as hard, so that they could do more together and whatever and have a good relationship. And so he's kind of learned this ingenuity and engineering, kind of like a MacGyver type situation. And when he's stuck washing and stuff, to get out of that and have time to go sell the chocolates, he creates a contraption that the dog powers that will do the washing for everyone.
And that's very Willy Wonka.
And that's very Willy Wonka. And so that was clever and interesting and shows, oh, this is a guy who's a really great inventor. And later, when he gets money and crazy amounts of time and doesn't know what to do with himself, he could make crazy, almost magic-like chocolate through engineering. But in this one, it's like, yeah, he is that, but ignore all that because he's just going to use magic.
Yeah, and it's just odd because he also talks about being like a magician and that he wanted to be a magician, but then there's literal actual magic happening. So it's just, I don't know. On its own, it would have been good, but compared to Gene Wilder's unhinged, amazing, creative, fabulous performance, it just isn't. And we just rewatched that one, and that one's just perfect and weird, and this just doesn't have the same vibe.
Yeah, and so, but again, kind of taking away the original and looking at this one as it is, I think it struggles that Wonka never has to try hard. He just kind of can do everything and lucks into stuff and happens to have the right ingredients all the time.
And everyone gets the exact dream ending that they've wanted.
Everyone gets a dream ending. And it all works out, and all is so happy and fun, and just that's great, because it is a kid's movie, and things generally do end on a happy note, and I'm not, disputing that side of things, but, I don't know, there's only one moment where he's, despairs for about 30 seconds, and then they come up with a plan to get around it.
Yeah. And you're telling me that they live in a city that's so freezing right now that his piping hot chocolate freezes in 10 seconds, but he's able to swim over 4 miles of the ocean water in the ice cold at night?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. There's just a lot of kind of stuff like that. And again, the whole world is over the top and fantastical. And there's no grounding of this. And I think part of that issue is also the heavy use of CGI. There are very few practical effects in this movie.
And it shows.
Yeah, it just... you can make people float without using a CGI double. You could just put them on wires. And they do once or twice, but not all the time. Yeah. You could make real chocolate. You could build a set. You could, do all of these things practically, or at least augment it with practicality. Set it, the original was filmed in Munich. Go back to Munich. It looks pretty similar in parts. You could just film an old town in Europe, somewhere else in Germany if you have to, so that you're not just CGIing this whole wonderland behind them all.
Yeah, and we talked about this too we had a very vocal child in our audience who was just so cute and was very excited and just commented throughout the whole movie. But when all this fantastical, magical stuff is happening, they're flying across the city with, like, holding balloons and dancing through the air and all this stuff.
Milking a giraffe.
He says nothing. And then they drop down from an elevator and he drops his cane, Willy Wonka, and it stands straight up. And that's what he was like, how did he do that?
Yeah, because it's grounded in something as a kid. You understand, I let go of the cane, it falls. We all know that the balloons are fantastical and all that, so, like, your brain just doesn't register, and even as a kid, he knows that, like, oh yeah, it's just a guy flying, whatever. Yeah. But to see something that defies logic and looks real to your eyes blows the kid's mind, and it's like, oh,
and if everyone is crazy and wild and magical, then why is Willy Wonka special?
Yeah. Like, oh, he makes chocolate that tastes really good.
So does three other people.
Yeah. Good enough that there's a whole religious cult that's, like, betrayed the Catholic Church in order to run a corrupt chocolate monastery because they want to eat these little pieces of chocolate from the guys.
Yeah, the police chief is willing to give up his career and his family in order to, like, overthrow all this stuff so that he can eat more chocolate. So obviously their chocolate is good. Like, what?
Yeah. It was lacking. It was too fantastical, and it lacked any sort of grounding or starting point for the audience to understand why Wonka is able to do all of this and achieve what he does. And yeah, what would you rate it?
On its own, I would have rated it like a 7 or an 8, but after watching the original, it's dropped down to like a 5.
Yeah, I would go on its own like a 6. After watching the original, like, honestly, a 2.
Yeah.
I've never been a huge fan of the original, and you'll hear more about this in a second, so stick around. I've never been a huge fan of it, but rewatching it today, I was like, wow, this is great. This is really an entertaining and wild movie, and I love it. So, yeah, let's talk about that more.
No daydreaming.
What are we gonna do, Willy?
Huh?
A double huh.
Do you have a pencil and paper?
Uh-huh.
I got an idea.
All right, so the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah, what do you mean you were never a fan of this one?
It was just not a huge part of my childhood. I watched it, maybe twice in my life before this.
Really?
I've probably seen the Johnny Depp one more as a kid.
That's
because
crazy.
we watched that one in school a couple times.
I loved the original.
Yeah, so this came out in 1971, which is wonderful because it predated crazy CGI and computer graphics and stuff for movies, and so everything is real.
Yeah, and there's really only like 3 scenes that look dated and aged and silly and stupid. You know what I mean? Like, everything else looks really good.
And honestly, I bet if you showed a kid, they wouldn't even really register.
No, because as a kid, I was like, whoa.
Yeah, you just get caught up in the magic. But this movie, overall, we all know Grandpa Joe's the worst. We could talk about that for a minute if you want, and how awful this man is.
Yeah, he goes on my top 10 hated characters list for sure.
Just complaining that he can't get out of bed. The kid gives him money for tobacco, but they can't afford cabbage water. Like, it's just, he's just constantly doing the exact opposite of what the mother is asking of him or wants him to do, and he keeps goading Charlie to do crazier things and stuff. And I guess it works out in the end, so that's good. But he literally won't get out of bed for 20 years, and it's like, oh, if only I could, I'd go get a job and help us. And then the golden ticket comes in, and not only does he get out of bed, but he does a whole musical number.
Yeah, and he doesn't even, like, Charlie doesn't even offer to take his mother, who's working herself ragged, taking care of all of them. For 20 years, she's taken care of them alone.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Anyways.
Grandpa Joe is awful. Anyway, the real standout of this movie, as everybody knows, is Gene Wilder, who, fun fact, doesn't show up for almost halfway through the movie, which is crazy. Anyway, Gene Wilder is exceptional. And this is the type of movie you are not likely to get nowadays in Hollywood, because he is not a hero. He actively, kids are like, I'm going to do this thing. And he goes, oh no, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Or just starts singing at them in German, or, starts making jokes about people dying and
then they
doing
do
terrible things. And yeah, he's just crazy and doesn't care and is enjoying the fact that these kids are putting themselves in terrible danger.
He's also mean.
And he's very rude and mean, and just every turn he gets to make fun of them or goad them or make them feel stupid, he takes it. And that is so different from the Timothée Chalamet version. And I think it's really, you wouldn't get that today because it's not nice. And it doesn't, you wouldn't set the main character of a kid's movie to be a bad person. So I guess technically this one, Charlie is the main character. And so...
I mean, it's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's not Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
But you spend the whole movie with Charlie, only part of it with Wonka. But, so Charlie's a good person. And I think you could have done that in the Wonka movie if we did, Wonka is this crazy, unhinged, wants to sell chocolate at any cost. And he has, a business partner who's trying to do the right thing and stops him from doing terrible things or whatever.
Like a Robert Pattinson and an Andrew Garfield combo,
which
mayhaps.
We talked about this afternoon, possibly. But yeah, there's an edge to this movie. It is a kid's movie, but kids be warned.
It's spooky and off-putting, but you smile the entire time.
Yeah. And I think it is really a well put together film. It moves quickly. It never really drags. The fact that we were wow, Wonka's only just showing up now, so we paused it to see how long. We're oh, we're already an hour into this thing. And then you're just you're dropping kids like flies, and then 15 minutes from the end, they haven't even lost Mike TV.
Yeah. And
then the movie's over. And there's no annoying post-credits. There's no annoying, dragging it on to see all the resolution with the family. It's just nope, the movie's done now.
Yeah.
The interesting things have ended.
And I've watched this movie a ton, and I didn't even remember that it was a musical. I know that there are songs in it, but it started and they sang the Who Can Take the Sunshine, whatever. And I was oh, he does sing this. How weird that they're just singing this one song. And then it kept going. I was oh no, they sing this whole time. Whereas the Wonka one with Timothée Chalamet, it's for sure a musical, and it's not a good one. You know what I mean? The songs kind of feel out of place, whereas this one, they just fit so well into it. And it's just great.
Yeah. And so then, another weird thing that doesn't quite, line up between these two movies is, again, in Wonka, he has a chocolate with these flies inside that will make you fly. And then, fast forward to the end of his career, and suddenly he is trying to make soda that will have you float because it's such a crazy, fantastical thing, but he can't get it right. And then, in the original, he's able to make one that makes someone experience a whole night out on the town and getting really drunk and then falling asleep. But in this one, he can't quite get it right for you to taste a 3-course meal.
Yeah, and you blow up like a blueberry.
Yeah. He's not able to do all these crazy, insane things. And when you go to the store, what do they sell? Chocolate bars. What else does he sell? Chocolate bars. It's like buying a Hershey bar, but it's just Wonka instead. And the original the new Wonka is not that at all. He hardly ever makes just chocolate.
Yeah.
And so it really... I don't know in the filmmaker's mind what happened between these two movies that suddenly the entire world has forgotten about magic and chaos, and Wonka stopped making all these fantastic treats and just went back to chocolate bars. But clearly something did.
Yeah, and what made him close the factory for 3 years? There's just there is so much room to do an amazing prequel if you insisted on doing a prequel. I think people should be making new original movies, but that's besides the point. If you wanted for sure to do a prequel of this, there were so many different routes you could have gone. Why did he close down? Or what made him go crazy? Or, whatever. But instead, you went some weird fantastical route that doesn't at all, even one part of it, line up with the original.
Yeah. So I get there's that brief moment I mentioned in Wonka where it cuts wide and you see that this is all happening in his head. I think maybe lean into that more of you know, he's crazy and everyone's more normal around him. And then at the end of the day, the like moral of the story is like, yeah, your dream might be insane and seem crazy, but if you know, work hard and do the right things, you can achieve them and become a great chocolate salesman. What a fun, normal message for a kids movie.
Yeah.
But instead it's just like, what? Make the world's greatest chocolate and then you'll make the world's greatest chocolate.
Yeah.
Like,
and like, spoiler alert if you haven't watched the spoiler section of the Wonka one, but in part of it, he takes a ton of money to leave and never make chocolate again and whatever. And they could have just ended it there, and then it would make sense why he was so crazy, because he found out that being a good person doesn't always work out, and then maybe he becomes like a weird, crazy villain man. But instead, his ship explodes, he swims back to shore, and he still makes chocolate and lives happily ever after the end.
yeah. So I really don't understand these as connected movies, and I don't get why they tried. And yeah.
Yeah.
So, old Willy Wonka, 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I would give that a 9 out of 10 for sure. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, really great. I don't see any reason to watch any other version. It still holds up. The humor is great. The spooky is spooky. The sets are cool. It's just a really well done film, and so watch that one. I mean, if you really want to, go see Wonka, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Wait for streaming,
yeah.
honestly.
It's a holiday movie. If you want to keep your kids quiet for 2 hours at the theater, enjoy. But if you're a fan of the original, I'd just watch that again.
There's no earthly way of knowing
He's singing.
which direction we are going.
All right, thank you for listening to our episode this week. Make sure you tune in every Monday for a new one, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Nerd and Normie.
If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. And if you're listening on audio platform, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps us out.
Thank you.